people, welcome back to another Writing Tip Tuesday. I'm Sammy and I'm a writer who likes to help other writers become better writers. This week I want to talk to you about the point of view that you're writing your story in. It may seem for some people like it's the easiest thing to choose, like obviously I'm going to write this in first person, obviously I'm going to write this in a close third person, but some people don't know and there's a lot of different factors that can lead to which one you choose. So I wanted to go through some of the options for what you can write your story in and a couple of reasons or questions you can ask yourself before choosing one to dive into, because there's nothing worse than getting like halfway through and realizing maybe this would actually be better in third person instead of first person, because then you have to go and you have to change everything. So first, let me talk about the point of views that are available to you. There is, of course, first person, which is I, me, my, we, from the perspective of the character that is going through the story. It's the perspective that allows you to get fully into the character's head. You know everything that they know, and it takes away some opportunities for dramatic irony where you know something that the character doesn't, unless you have multiple perspectives that are all told in first person, where you can know something that one character doesn't, but the other character does. I've personally noticed that first person stories tend to be romance type novels and YA novels, but that's not exclusive to them, and you don't have to write in first person to write one of those genres. It's just the ones that I noticed the most. And also coming of age stories have a tendency to be in first person from the ones that I've read. The next point of view is not used super commonly in narrative writing, which is second person. And second person is like you is the character that we're following. You, your, y'all. It's not seen super common in regular narrative fiction writing because it's a little bit awkward, but it can be used very often in poetry and also like self-insert style fan fiction type deals where it's like, you're gonna go see your celebrity crush and they're gonna fall in love with your name kind of stories. So you can use it. It's just not super common for narrative writing. You can also use it in like children's books because it gives the child something to attach to while they're reading it. So it's teaching empathy, like you feel like this. How would you want your friends to feel? Those kind of like very young era need to have something to latch onto, can't necessarily always empathize with the character in the book. That age range will have second person as their point of view. Then we are on to the third persons. There are several different ways that you can do third person, but all third persons are he, she, they. You're externally referring to all of the characters, including your main character or whatever character you are focusing on in that moment. So the first one and I'm going to talk about is third person omniscient, which is told from the perspective of a narrator and not necessarily from any character's perspective. So it's able to bounce around from character to character and give you like full insight into how the characters feel, what they're thinking, and just bounce around between those. It knows everything about everyone that's in there. Therefore, omniscient. Omniscient means all-knowing. That's a perspective that you see in like big cast of character stories, like epics have third-person omniscient very often. Anything where the external conflict has a tendency to overpower the internal conflict will lead to that kind of story where you're bouncing between the characters based on what is most important to understanding the external conflict. Then there is third-person limited, which still uses that he, she, they, but it is limited to just one character. So you look through the eyes of one character. It's similar to first person because the reader gets that same kind of closeness with the character, and it allows you to get into that character's head without having all of the narration come entirely from their perspective. So you're able to show some more things that maybe the character has not yet noticed, or give the opportunity for some dramatic irony where the reader knows something that the character doesn't, and you don't have to have everything written in that character's voice. Percy Jackson and Harry Potter are written in a limited third person where you look through the one character's eyes but like over their shoulder instead. Those are the ones that I think are the most like known books that I could reference, but there are a lot of books written in this close limited third person. There is also the objective third person, which I think is an interesting concept, though I don't know of any examples I can think of that are told in this way, that are told from third person, but exclusively from the narrator's perspective. The narrator narrator doesn't know anything about anybody internally. The narrator will just know what's going on that you can see. It's very much like a movie where the camera sees everything. It only can show you what it sees. You're not gonna get like, she feels depressed. You're gonna get, she doesn't speak to anyone. She goes into the darkest room possible and just stays there. She doesn't eat. That's what you're gonna get. The reader is gonna have to do a little bit more digging on that before they're gonna understand the exact feelings like you would when you're in a character's head, at least a little bit. So how do you choose a point of view to write in when there's so many different options? Some of them are very similar but slightly different. How do you know what is right for your story? Some things to think about are, how many characters do you have that are very integral to the story? If there's just one, you can do first person or third person limited. If there's like a ragtag bunch of people that are all equally playing off of each other, maybe third person omniscient. If you have two main characters that are like gonna fall in love, maybe you want to alternate chapters between a limited third person with one character and then a limited third person with the other character. Maybe you want to do first person with both of them and just alternate so that you have that insight into both of them. Maybe only one of the characters' perspectives actually matters to the progress of your story and you only need one of them. Something else to think about is what the main overarching genre of your story is. And if you're not quite sure on what that is, I've got a video on figuring out the genre and subgenre of your story you can check out. I'll put a link in the description as well. But if your genre has a tendency to lean in one way or the other, where it's normally these books are written in first person, or it's normally these books are written in third person limited, you're gonna wanna try to either follow that or make yourself stand out a little bit by doing something different. Being aware of what the main genre of your story does most often can give you the opportunity to make that choice. If your story is gonna be something that's like more common, like if you're writing a detective story, maybe you'll want to try something that's a little bit different in terms of the narration style, the point of view, so that you can stand out a little bit more in terms of the other books that are already out there. So you can have more opportunity for people to want to read your book or a publisher to want to pick it up because it's something new and different, where like detective stories are all kind of on the same vein. There's a crime, there's a detective has to figure out what the crime is, and then you figure out what the crime is. All of the different things that those stories have to offer, like a different type of detective, a different personality of the detective, a different crime, a different method of solving the case. But at a certain point, they're all very similar. And that's what readers are into. When you are a reader who reads that kind of genre all the time, you're gonna want to have some sort of semblance of comfort in that kind of, I know what's gonna happen, but I don't know what's gonna happen. So giving them something that's a little bit different of an experience might make that an easy sell for getting it off the shelves. Or it might be easier to just go with the flow and write in the same point of view that people expect, so that they don't have to be like, oh no, that's written in first person. I like it better when it's in third. I don't know why I don't like this. It's just like, really just what you feel confident in the genre thing, but taking note of what the genre tends to do or what the genre leans towards, because I'm sure not every single book in one genre is written in the same perspective, though there is a potential that many of them are written in the same kind of perspective. Another thing to think about is how much of what do you want to get across? So some perspectives have more capability of getting across emotional development and personal growth, character arcs, and things like that, where others can get across more external details, more outside things that maybe your character doesn't notice. So first person and third person limited are going to give you more opportunities for emotional growth, more opportunities to see a character change the way that they perceive the world or think and act. Whereas third person omniscient and third person objective are going to give you more opportunities to show things that are going on around the characters. As well as third person limited, it has more opportunities to show you things that the character may not notice than first person does. It's still more closely linked with the character, that it may be a little bit more awkward to do so, but it's still fully capable of showing you things and building dramatic irony. Are you going to want to follow multiple characters and do an alternating perspective, or are you going to want to stick with one main character throughout the whole book? Because if you're only going to want to stick with one main character, then you can choose whichever method and just keep with it. If you're going to want to alternate between multiple characters, maybe you have first person for multiple characters, maybe you have third person omniscient for these characters, and you don't necessarily switch like on the chapter, but you have different sections assigned to different characters so that everything just sort of flows together. Maybe you do third person limited and you alternate between chapters, and third person limited gives you a little bit more space to keep a consistent writing style without having to change too much, because you're in third person, the narrator can tell the story the same kind of way, whereas first person is going to have the narrator be the character, and the character would have to change how they think if you are changing characters, if that makes sense. Like, character A is going to think and narrate differently than character B would think and narrate the story, but if you're doing third person limited and you're just staying close with each of character A and character B, your narration style can remain very similar without taking anything away from either of those characters. Generally speaking though, the thing that is the most important is what you feel confident writing. And there are different things that each point of view requires of you that maybe you don't feel great at, or maybe you want more practice in, or maybe you think is the best thing about your writing, and then you can make that decision based on what your goals are for the project. If you want it to be easy and just crank it out as fast as possible, choose whatever perspective you feel confident and like great about writing in. If you want to use this as a development opportunity, then for sure do something that you think could definitely be stronger if you had more practice in it. Each of the more common perspectives, so first, third, limited, and third omniscient, all require a different skill from the author. So like first person, you're gonna need to know what is going on in your character's head at all times. And you're gonna need to know how to change that inner monologue into something that tells the story. So you need to know what the character is thinking, what the character is noticing, how the character is feeling, and say all of that in their perspective, in that character's voice. And then also all of the dialogue of other characters and anything else that happens. Close third person, you need to figure out the balance between how much detail do you want to put into things that your character doesn't see, how much detail you want to put into what your character does see and feel, and make that balance between the external and the internal of your character. How many things are going on that your character doesn't necessarily know about, but you want your reader to know about? How much of each of those things do you want to have in your story? And third person close, third person limited is like super in the middle on that, where you can choose third person limited and have the opportunity for that emotional growth and external detail, but you need to know how to balance and juggle those things. Third person omniscient, you're gonna need to know which character to follow at what point and what things to show at what point. You're also going to need to know what goes on in each of your characters' heads at all times, pretty much, and be able to do that juggling act of who's the important part of this story right now. How do we bounce between all of these characters? What character is going to show the most of what I need them to show? And so on. Generally, I think whatever you feel naturally will come out is the easiest choice, but sometimes it's interesting to think about other aspects of your story that may make a different point of view more effective for your story. Sometimes the one that you think is going to be the easiest ends up being harder than you think it would. I used to always want to write in first person, and there was always this point where I would be like, I don't really know how to tell what I need to tell or show what I need to show because it's from this character's perspective and I don't know if they know this, but I need this to happen. So I give up. And then I tried out a third person limited and didn't have that problem. So I think that's a challenge that I would need to overcome in first person writing, which I actually haven't done in a while. So I may have to fiddle with that at some point soon and see what that does now that I am older, wiser, and more practiced and well-read. Who knows? What perspective do you gravitate towards? What is your go-to perspective? And what perspective do you think that you would not have a good time writing in? I'm just curious. Let me know in the comments. But that is all that I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something from it, please leave a like. It'll really help me out and tell YouTube that maybe more people would also learn something from this video. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I am here every Tuesday and Saturday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Story Study Saturdays. So I will be back on Saturday with another story study for you. See you then.